les amis, aujourd'hui je vais raconter Awesome Friendly Adventure, ok? 7 livres, parce que j'ai fini le livre Garfield. Ok, je commence. Ah non. Attends, je pense que oui. Ok, pas grave, je vais raconter cette histoire. Once upon a time, in a land far away, there lived a boy named Roland. And Roland was a very good boy. Back then, school hadn't been invited yet, so most kids worked on their family farms all day. But Roland's parents thought it was important for their son to get an education and to learn to play an instrument. So he spent his days inside reading books and practicing the flute. Roland didn't practice the flute very much, but he never complained because he wanted to be a good son. It was a dangerous time when ogre and giant roamed the land. So Roland's parents selected him to stay indoors when it was safe, especially after dark. Time to come inside now, Roland. Roland had never even been outside his village. He wished he could go on an adventure like his grandpa Bampy, the brave who used to fight monsters and search for treasure. But Bampy was never the same after he got back from his adventure. And Roland knew that was because Bampy didn't always wear his helmet and he got hit on his head a few too many times. Bampy. Roland promised his parents that if he went on an adventure, he'd always wear a helmet and he'd make a good choice. But they said he'd be much safer staying at home practicing his flute. The only thing Roland could do was reading a story about Bampy and imagine what it could be like to have adventure of his own. Sometime after Roland read about the monster in Bampy's story, he'd get kind of scared and then he'd have to sleep. But his parents probably didn't mind because they loved him very much. Most of the time, Roland's dad worked from home, but once or twice a month. He'd go on a business trip to another village, and Roland's dad would always say the same thing when he left. Look after your mom, son. Pat, pat. Right about now, you're probably thinking so far, this is a pretty boring book. But just wait because in a second it'll be to get really good. This one morning when Roland's dad was on one of this trip, something totally crazy happened. Roland woke up early to practice his flute, but then it got really cold in his room. And when he looked out the window, he couldn't believe it was snowing. Oh yeah, I probably should have mentioned that this was the middle of the summer, because then you'd be even more amazed. Roland ran down the kitchen to tell his mom about the snow, but he couldn't find her anywhere. So Roland went outside to ask neighbor Mr. Nettle where his mom was because Mr. Nettle was probably nosy and he always knew everybody's business. But that's when Roland comes some really bad news. Mr. Nettle was the white warcock coming of the village and kidnapped Roland's mom. And he took her to his ice fortress where it was keeping her as a prisoner. Now Roland was totally freaked out. You're probably thinking, well, why didn't Roland just call his dad? But guess what? Phone weren't invited yet, so he couldn't. Plus, if Roland mailed his dad a letter to tell him what happened, it would get to him for a long time because back then the mail took forever. Roland was worried about his mom, but he was also worried what his dad was going to say when he got home from his trip. And very disappointed in you, son. Roland decided the only thing he could do was travel the ice fortress and rescue his mom on his own. But Roland knew the journey was going to be dangerous, and he went down to the basement and got Bampy's old armor out of a musty chest. And even thought Roland was a little nervous about Monster and sad about his mom getting kidnapped. He was also excited because he was about to go on his first adventure. After I wrote this first chapter of my book, I showed it to my mom, who said she was proud of me for using my imagination. Then he said he couldn't wait to find out what happened next. I haven't shown it to my dad yet because I want to finish it first. And when I'm done, I'm going to ask him to read it to me as my bedtime story. But I pretend I don't know what's gonna happen, so it still be special. I was pretty excited to show the book to my best friend Greg Helfley because he likes story with dragon and wizard and that kind of stuff, and I figured he'd think it was pretty awesome. But I couldn't really tell if it liked it or not much. At first time, he didn't say much. He asked Greg what he thought of the story so far. And he asked me if I wanted his honest opinion or if he should tell me what I wanted to hear. And I said I want his honest opinion. But Greg reminded me that the last time I asked him for his honest opinion, he got him in trouble. What was the time he showed him my tap dancing routine after talking my first lesson? Tappity, 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 tappity. Greg told me he thought it was terrible and that hurt my feeling. So I told his mom what he said, and she wasn't happy. Greg said if he told me honest opinion about my book and it hurt my feeling, I wasn't allowed to go run to his mom. So I said okay, and we did a pinky swear. After that was settled, Greg told me all the story were wrong with my story. The boy, he had a lot to say. The first thing he said is that I can't start a book with Once Upon a Time because that's corny and I make it sound like a fairy tale. And that kind of hurt my feeling right away because it's supposed to be a fairy tale. When Greg said no offense, but this Roland character has got a lot of problems and the biggest one is his hair. Ok, aujourd'hui je vais raconter ici. Demain, je vais continuer l'histoire Awesome Friendly Adventure. Ok? Alors, je vais vous voir demain. Au revoir.